in those scrimmages. Also, the onside kicks, those are going to get scaled back quite a bit. The big one I want to talk about today is the hip drop tackle ban. We'll talk about that because it's only happening at this level. Had an opportunity yesterday to talk to a college official about what he thinks of this particular rule, if it's something that's needed in college, if it's something that they've heard of coming down the pipeline, different things like that. Also going to talk about the new challenge rule, new reviewable plays, offensive fouls on change of possession. That's more of just kind of a focus as far as that goes. But let's get started today. Let's talk about basically what the NFL looks at. The NFL looks at 5 different categories when it's considering making a new rule change. And those are, one, does the rule change improve the game? They hope that it improves the game, that it makes it better. How will it be officiated? Is another one. How will it be coached? Can the player apply the rule on the field? And I think that's a big one, is can the players apply it on the field? Because there's some rules that do take multiple games, not only multiple games, but sometimes multiple seasons for for players to really get that down. I think if you go back to college, you look at a number of different rules there. We've seen some different ones come in, particularly targeting. It's taken athletes quite a while to get into that as far as being able to adjust to it, because those are tackles that were legal at one time, or they were hits that were legal at one time. And now, we still see it happen on the field, but a lot of those athletes, as they come in, particularly as freshmen, end up getting hit with those rules. That targeting rule has been a really, really tough one. The NFL kind of puts that a little bit differently. We'll talk about that, on another show. That's for a different topic. Also, does the change enhance player protection? And that's one of the things that we've talked about a lot, particularly over the last number of years. When you look at football's been under a microscope, particularly when it comes to concussion protocol and so forth. We joke that, you go back in the day, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, maybe even early 90s, and you talk about the athletes, they come over to the side after getting their bell rung a little bit. Coaches kind of held up 2 fingers. How many do I have? 2 fingers, and maybe they had 3 up, but they're just like, close enough, get back out on the field. That's not the way it's handled today. Things are a lot different. So a lot of the rules that end up coming into play also have that safety aspect with them. We'll talk about that as we move forward as well. So one of the things you got to remember when it comes to the kickoff rule breakdown is we're coming off the lowest kickoff return rate in NFL history. Just so many are going through the end zone. So many are not being brought back out. There's been incentive for them to take any, and a lot of that has been a safety protocol. It's been something to say, hey, we don't want these high-speed collisions, but they also have realized that it kind of has bored the game a little bit as far as the kickoffs go. It used to be that a kickoff was a big deal, and a kickoff was exciting. In the NFL, that excitement got taken out. It just wasn't there for a long time. Even in college, most of the kicks are put back into the end zone now. At the high school level, there's a lot of the kickers can't get it to the end zone. So really high school has been where the most exciting kickoff returns have really been taking place over the last, period of time, just because a lot of the kickers can't get it to the end zone. It comes short, ends up being able to be returned. But the way it is, the new kickoff rule kind of breaks down like this. One, it's going to look more like a scrimmage play than it is the traditional kickoff that you're used to. So what'll happen is the kicker's going to line up on the 35-yard line of his own side of the field, but his teammates, the other 10 teammates, are going to line up down on the 40-yard line on the other side of the field. Across from them on the 35-yard line, and even some on the 30 will be the receiving team as well. Basically what it's going to do is it's going to put them considerably closer to those who are going to be receiving the ball to create kind of a new form of kind of almost like a free kick play, but it's going to resemble the typical line of scrimmage. It's going to line those players so they're quite a bit closer together. What that's going to do is that's going to restrict some movement. We're going to talk about how that affects who you're going to put on the field, by the way. It's going to restrict some of that movement to reduce the space and speed. It's going to promote more returns is what the league thinks it's going to do anyway. I don't know if you've had a chance to watch this in some of the preseason. But basically, I think what you're going to see, it's been that kickoffs have been more of a speed game. So you put a lot of your speed players out there that can get up and down the field. I think now moving the kicking team's line down the field to that 40-yard line, what we're going to see is we're going to see players that can hold the line a bit better, maybe some of your bigger players on here and not have it quite as much of a speed game. What they're doing with this is taking out, or they're attempting to take out that uh, high impact collision that happens oftentimes in football on those returns, maybe get rid of some injuries that way and promote, some of those returns. In fact, one of the things it does, this is basically how it works. I'm going to read this verbatim. What it says if the ball comes down between the 20-yard line and the goal line, okay, this is what we're looking at. So if it comes down between the 20-yard line and the goal line, any kick that hits and stays in that landing zone, that's called the landing zone. Any kick that hits and stays in that landing zone must be returned. Must be returned. Any kick that hits in that landing zone, again, that's the 20-yard line to the goal line. Any kick that bounces from the landing zone into the end zone must be returned or downed for a touchback. Now, that's similar to what it's been before anyway. They just didn't designate what was the landing zone on that. So it can be downs for a touchback. However, that's going to only come out again now to the 20-yard line, where it was coming out longer before. So it's only going to come out to the 20-yard line. So that's almost a kickback to your 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s football, early 2000s even. Okay. Now, if the kick fails to reach the 20-yard line, which I just don't see how that's going to happen unless it's just a completely errant kick. But if it fails to reach the 20-yard line, the receiving team takes possession on their 40-yard line. So if the ball does not, on the kick, does not reach the 20-yard line, they automatically take possession on their 40-yard line. If the kick reaches the end zone in the air, it's going to be kind of similar to the way it was before. They can either return it or down it and take possession at the 30-yard line. Now, if the kick goes out of bounds, it's going to come out to the 40-yard line. That's where they're going to get it. So, those are your changes that we look at there. They're hoping that that's going to promote more returns. We'll see as we get into the regular season. In the preseason, they test out a lot of these rules, but a lot of those players are not the players that are going to be playing during the regular season. Sometimes they're just on for a couple plays and then off for a couple, later on in the preseason, as we're seeing now. You do get some of your starters that play a little bit more time, but during a lot of the preseason, they're shuffling players in and out on a pretty quick basis to be able to, kind of see how individual players are going to work, if they're going to be able to make the team, or they're going to get cut, and so forth. Anyway, that's just something to think of. Now, this is a rule that really, when it comes down to it, this is an easy rule to enforce because it's set in stone. You know where the players are starting at, and it's got definite rules of this is the landing zone. We of course know exactly where the end zone is. And so does the ball land in the landing zone? Is it short of the landing zone? Does it go to the end zone? These are things that are pretty cut and dry. That's going to be easy to implement. It's going to be easy to officiate. Again, whether you like the rule or not, and time will tell whether we like the rule or not, whether it adds excitement to the game as it's supposed to do by promoting more returns. That's a whole different topic, whether we like it or not. But that one will be easy to be officiated because it is very, very cut and dry. And a lot of rules, oftentimes the beef that I have is just that they're not able to be officiated, at least on a consistent basis. So occasionally you have some that the extremes are easy to officiate, but the extremes are extremes for a reason. That's because they're not the norm. And the norm becomes very, very difficult oftentimes to officiate. The other one is the onside kicks. The onside kicks are getting scaled back. Now, this is a whole different ball of wax as far as onside kick goes. Now, onside kicks, you see them a lot at the high school level, some at the college level, and not near as many at the NFL level unless somebody needs it right towards the end. They're very, very hard to be successful on. However, at the high school level, you see it a lot. Now, remember, these are NFL changes. They are not high school changes. So this is the way the new rule works. And this is according to NBC Sports, just just give them a little credit on that. All onside kicks must be declared in advance. And again, that's because your lineup now is different, and where your teams line up at are different. Going to get more back to the traditional lineup that you have as opposed to what we're going to see with the new kickoff rule. So they got to let them know in advance that they're doing it. Gives the receiving team a little extra time to get their squad in order. Now, onside kicks are also now entirely limited to the fourth quarter. Entirely limited to the fourth quarter. Now, in the NFL, it was rare to see one in a time other than the fourth quarter anyway. So it's a good thing that this is not coming down to the high school levels right now, because we see it at the high school levels a lot. You'll see a team oftentimes, come out, kicking off. Maybe they started the game with the ball. So they're kicking to start the second half, and they come out and just throw an onside kick that no one's expecting. They jump on it, and now they got the ball at the first of both halves. So that's a real strategy play in high school. But as far as the NFL goes, fourth quarter only on that. And here's another kicker: it can only be done by the team that's down. If you have the ball and you are up, you cannot do an onside kick. Okay. Let's see. Here's some of the other things that it says. It's so if you're winning, you're trying to secure the added advantage. To the gamble of an onside kick, you're just completely out of luck with that. You can't do that. So the onside kick rule has changed. And again, whether you agree with the rule or don't agree with the rule, it'll be a pretty easy rule to officiate. It's not that big of a deal. It's pretty cut and dry as far as that goes. And later on in the football season, back here on Yappin Sports, we'll discuss and we'll get your fan feedback on whether you've ended up liking the rules or not. Sometimes we listen to a rule that's coming out, we hear it, and we think, oh man, that's going to be a disaster. Or we might think, hey, that's going to be great. And then at the end of the day, when we look at it, it might be the opposite of what we thought it was going to be. So let's give it a little bit of time to see if we like it or not. Right off the bat, to be honest with you, the onside kick rule is really not that big of a deal to me, just because it doesn't play that big of a role in the NFL. Yes, it does play a role, but not that big of a role to me. And as far as the the look of the new kickoff rule, time will tell. And again, we'll discuss that as we get later on down the road. There are some new challenge rules. By the way, the NFL has approved a measure to allow teams a third replay challenge after just one successful challenge earlier in the game. Remember, previously you had to have two successful challenges before you were able to get that third. So now they just have to have one. And that could affect the game a little bit. That definitely could affect the game, because challenges are important and they're used a lot in today's game. Also, there's new reviewable plays. The NFL will now allow two more types of plays to be reviewed via replay. Officials can assess whether or not a passer was down or out of bounds, something that they couldn't review before, prior to throwing a pass, and whether or not the play clock expired before the ball was snapped. They can do that as well. They can do that through the replay review. There's a little more focus on some of the offensive fouls on changes of possession. This is exactly what NBC has here. It says the NFL will now enforce any major foul by the offense on a play in which possession changes. So, i.e. fumble, interception, things like that. And there were fouls on both teams. In previous instances, the fouls by the offense were usually ignored in favor of sorting out defensive penalties and determining possession of the ball. So offensive foul on possession changes. So those are the new rules that by and large are going to be a bit more enforceable. Some of them will be easy to enforce. A little bit of gray area when you get down to the one that we just spoke about with the offensive fouls and changes of possession. But again, do these have change on the game? Yes, they have change on the game. We'll see if we like them. If we don't like them, they're going to be pretty easy to officiate. But let's get on to the one now that has problems. And right before we do that, let's talk about IdahoSports.com. Remember, you can log on to IdahoSports.com. You can get your schedules, rosters, scoreboards, prepcasts, of course, all the tournament coverage on IdahoSports.com. Standings and polls, those do not come out on week one, by the way. Come out as the season moves on a little bit. Game streams, tons of action photos. If you have never been into the action photos section on IdahoSports.com, once the season is enrolled, you want to go on there. There are some great action photos. And, of course, you can go on and purchase those if you'd like. Lots of previews, sports boards. And again, don't forget, the scoreboard, the Friday night flash that you can look and see how teams are doing around the state. Right now on IdahoSports.com, you got the 2024 statewide Idaho football preview. You definitely want to go on there, see where your team sits on that. High school teams, one of the things about high school is every year you tend to be dealt a different hand. Those kids move on. It's not a place where, by and large, you get extra eligibility. Kids in the transfer portal, do kids transfer? Yeah, but by and large, kids play where they live for the most part. There are some exceptions to that, but you don't see the movement, of course, like you see in college sports, like we talked about last week, where basically every player is a free agent at the end of the year. So don't forget to log on to IdahoSports.com. We got some exciting things coming up, by the way, on IdahoSports.com this year. You're going to want to look at the schedule for the webcasts. As far as the streaming of ball games, we're going to have a lot of fun for you on IdahoSports.com. Some nice changes this year, bring even a little bit more of a professional atmosphere on. You give a lot of that credit to Brandon Baney and, of course, Paul Kingsbury, Logan Green, myself. We've all sat down. We've talked about some of the stuff. It's going to be a lot of fun as we move forward. And don't forget, you can go to Brandon at IdahoSports.com. That's Brandon at IdahoSports.com. Give us some shout outs. Tell us what you think about these topics that we're talking about. I'm going to pick the best one each show. And you know what? You get a shirt. See this Yappin Sports shirt. You're going to get one of those if I think yours is the best. So I'll email you back. If I think yours is the best, we'll get your address and things, and we'll shoot that to you. So let's get back to topic. The one rule that I think is really going to cause a lot of nightmares this year, and of course, as the NFL does, they have to make everything a mess, have to make it 10 times more difficult than it probably has to be. What is the hip drop tackle ban? Okay, now one of the things with the hip drop, you can of course pop online and maybe go to YouTube and put in the hip drop tackle, and you can see how that tackle is given. But basically, what happens is as players, they grab the hip, and then they kind of go airborne and fall to the ground and pull that player with them in the ground. Now, there is a safety aspect to this that I think is in within kind of the spirit of safety that they're looking for in the NFL, because oftentimes those players now come down on the back of the legs of the runner. So I'm not saying there doesn't need to be some type of a change or some type of a focus, but it's going to be very difficult to officiate. So basically, this is what has happened here. Basically, it lets gravity do the work, like what we were talking about. It's the hip tackle that lets the gravity do the work, and it puts the runner's legs in a spot that is kind of vulnerable. In fact, if you go back, it's funny when Taysom Hill, who plays for the New Orleans Saints, when he was in college, he was injured at some point of every season he played in college. One of them happened to be that type of a tackle where they kind of came down funny on him. When he got to the NFL and started having success with the New Orleans Saints, a lot of people were saying, "Who is this kid? We've never even heard of him." Well, a lot of it was because of injuries. In fact, the most of it was because of injuries. But one of those particular injuries happened to be this type of injury. Most of them were a little bit kind of a freakish injury. So here's how the NFL defines a hip drop tackle. A hip drop tackle occurs when a defender wraps up a ball carrier and rotates or swivels his hips, unweighting himself and dropping onto the ball carrier's legs during the tackle. Okay. So my question is this: what if they make that tackle, but they don't drop onto the ball carrier's legs? Is that defined as legal or not legal? Because they listed in there of what that is. So is that legal or not legal in that scenario? This is the other thing too. Oftentimes, when a collision happens out there, the defender making the tackle tends to lose his footing anyway. And because, collisions are hard collisions. Sometimes you get what we call decleated a little bit. If they're able to hold on to that waist, well, their body's automatically pulling them to the ground anyway. It's almost like a bulldog, in the rodeo, when they lean their weight toward the ground to bring down that steer on steer wrestling. And what happens when somebody just naturally goes airborne? Do they have to let go now and let that runner continue on? This to me becomes a very, very difficult thing in order for officials to officiate. And this is the thing, that they're going to review these. This is my anticipation. You might disagree with this, but this is my anticipation. My anticipation is that we're not going to see quite as many whistles on this, but we are going to see a lot of fines come out of it. And I think what's going to happen is we're going to have fines that come out. Those are going to be followed by, of course, appeals. I mean, basically what I think is going to happen is the number of those tackles that ends up getting reviewed, they're going to go into this queue where these are reviewed at, and it's going to be like standing in the line at the DMV. And what happens if they're not able to get to everything that happened in that week? Does a player now 2 weeks down the road get suspended if he did it wrong and they finally caught what it was from his game 2 weeks ago? I mean, what's going to happen with this? And is suspension and fines and things like that, is that how we want to go with everything in the NFL? Is there a place for suspension? Is there a place for fines? Of course there is. But is it what we want to use as the default? And really, as I look at this rule and how hard it is for an official to to officiate, and how much subjectivity goes into it, what's the other way to enforce the rule then? If it's too hard, then these fines, these suspensions, and I think we're just going to see a whole lineup of suspensions and appeals that happen when it comes to this rule being implemented in the NFL. We'll see as the season moves on exactly what happens on this, but that hip swivel tackle, let's talk about it as well. It's not being implemented at the college level. It's not being implemented at the high school level. And this is a technique that's taught. Let's face it, it's a technique that's taught. It's been used for a lot of years. It's how oftentimes a smaller defender can bring down a larger defender. You look, for example, you take a big running back, and even at the high school level, we have a lot of running backs 200 plus pounds. They break through that line, and then get past your linebackers and into that secondary. There's a safety or a corner maybe even coming over and trying to make that tackle. That there's a huge size disadvantage on that. And what's going to happen in those situations? Well, the high school and college level, again, there is no ban put on, at least not right now. I talked to a college official yesterday who said he hasn't even heard anything coming down the pipe about it. In fact, kind of looking at it coming in the pros, they didn't realize it was really that much of an issue, because it's just part of the game at the college level. Does it cause some injuries occasionally? Of course it does. I mean, this is a rough game, but we've got to remember at the end of the day, we do want to avoid injuries as much as possible, but at the same time, it's a rough game. This game is not designed to be a soft game. We used to call it a contact sport. It's not a contact sport. It's a collision sport. Basketball is a contact sport. Soccer is a contact sport. Football, collision sport. Rugby, collision sport. But the NFL, certainly they're making these attempts to bring safety into it. Do we start hurting the integrity of the game at certain points? And again, time will tell. I think this is going to be one that we hit mid-season. We're going to have a lot of different takes on this, and players and coaches are split on this. You look at Harbaugh back in Baltimore. He likes it. He is in favor of it. And I think a lot of it, of course, he had one of his top players taken out last year from this very play. So, he's in favor of it. I think a lot of the coaches are. Players, it kind of varies. For a lineman, it's not that big of a deal. But again, you get a matchup out there of a smaller safety, small corner, all of a sudden has to come over and make a tackle on a 230, 240 pounder. They might have a different take on that and how that and how that's handled, on that. Because again, do we just want them diving at the legs as well? To bring them down because size makes a difference. Anyway, there's a lot of different things that we can talk about with this. It is something that's going to, I think, ring for the next little while, as far as whether we're really going to like it in the NFL, if it's really going to do what we talked about. We talk about those 5 things, and again, let's look at those again. Those 5 things. Does the change improve the game? How will it be officiated? And I think that's the single toughest question coming into that particular rule, is how it will be officiated. How will it be coached? Can the player apply the rule on the field? Does the change enhance player protection? Now, this is interesting. When we talk about how will it be coached, the coaches that I've heard that like it they've said how they like it. I've heard some say that they don't like it as much or that they're neutral on it, but they haven't really said how they're going to coach it with the new kickoff rule. There's some different strategies out there of how they're going to coach that. In fact, Bill Belichick, he's been on some different shows on there talking about how he would coach that new kickoff rule as well. So there's a lot of that, and I, in fact, he's one that he agrees kind of with the same stance that I do. As soon as I heard that was going to be the rule, immediately I'm like, wow, this is going to bring some bigger players back into the kickoff mix. It's really become a speed game more so, than a size game. I think this will bring some of the size back in, and again, time will tell. But I think we're going to see some of the size come back into this, and from there, who knows again what'll happen. But again, you can strategize on that. But this is, when it comes to this hip tackle ban, with that swivel in it, and again, was the swivel caused by the contact itself? Was it caused by the athlete? It's so subjective of how that is. I mean, you take in college objectivity to it, and we see it. We're all pleased at certain targeting calls every year. We're all frustrated with certain targeting calls every year. That's hard enough. But I think there is a whole different level of subjectivity that comes into this hip tackle ban rule that it's just, I just do not know. I cannot see. I have racked my brain. I cannot see a way that this is going to be able to be officiated on an even basis. But I want to know what you think out there listening to this. You can go to Brandon at IdahoSports.com. By the way, we are going to have a new shout out email that you're going to be able to get to, which is going to be Yappin Sports at IdahoSports.com. But for right now, you can still send it over to Brandon at IdahoSports.com. And of course, Brandon, as always, is our producer. He makes sure that things get in, that he gets it right, that he gets it done. And again, the best shout out that comes through, the best comment right there, Yappin Sports. And again, I don't just want to see, oh, this is going to kill the game. This is going to be great for the game. This is either give us a take of why. Why do you think it's going to hurt the game? Why do you think it's going to help the game on that? So as we look at that, make sure to do that on your shout out. So let's get right back to that hip tackle ban. And again, I think the ways that it will hurt the game is, one, I don't think that it can be officiated fairly. Number two, I think it puts a smaller player at a grave disadvantage when he has to make a tackle on a bigger player. Again, you get maybe we talked about a big running back coming through the line and getting through the initial line, getting through the linebackers, and all of a sudden you're into the secondary and a smaller guy's trying to take it down. Well, what about a big tight end coming off that line? There's a lot of those big tight ends, 240, 250, 260, 270, that are coming off of that. And, they get that reception, and it's going to be a smaller defender that comes up and takes them down. Again, this is, I think, because of those types of things, that it's not great for the game, because I think what you do is you take advantage that maybe a smaller player has, and you take that out of the game, not minimizing the potential for risk. For injury. I understand that there could be some injuries. But again, there's a lot of intricacies to the game of football. There's a lot of moving parts taking place there, more so than any of the other sports we have. There are more moving parts at one time. And I don't see a way where this is going to have a huge benefit to the game. I could just see through those things that I just mentioned that this can potentially hurt it more than help it. So again, give us a shout out. Make sure that you tell us why, and I'm going to pick the best one, get you a Yappin Sports t-shirt as well. Again, log on to Idaho Sports for schedule, scores, scoreboards, prepcasts, tournaments, standings and polls, game streams, action photos, previews, and again, on there right now, the 2024 statewide Idaho football previews. And let's talk about as well, our college is going to have to adjust. One of the things that I've talked about with college football, for example, is the NFL is a pocket quarterbacks game. And as you look down into college football, for years and years, college football, was putting out primarily pocket quarterbacks. go right into the NFL, make a big difference. You look at Dan Marino, John Elway, Joe Montana. A lot of those kind of players. Now you take like a Randall Cunningham. He was a runner. Steve Young had a lot of running as well. But these were also pocket guys, and they came out of primarily pocket systems. The college game now is very much a hybrid quarterbacks game. So there's less and less pocket guys coming into the pros. And of course, for a hybrid quarterback, got to remember in the pros, the hash lines, even though the field's the same size, the hash lines are closer together. It makes it harder for a quarterback on a speed-wise to get to that edge and to pick up as much significant yardage as they have in the college game, where the hash marks are wider apart and they have a lot farther way to be able to elude the defender, a lot longer way to elude that defender around one of those sides. So, I look at something like that and say, well, the NFL might have to adjust to the college game because they're the college games first. Well, now I look at a rule like this hip tackle rule is, our college is going to have to start adjusting to that. Is the college game going to look at it and say, hey, listen, from an NCAA standpoint, we've got to get these players prepared for the NFL. And because this is a tackle we see a lot in college football, is it something that they might have to look at down the road maybe sooner than later, to see if that's something they're going to have to implement in order to better prepare players for the NFL. So this is something that could affect some of our local sports as well. And really, the last frontier when it comes to rules, the last frontier is really high school football, the last Wild West frontier. They have a lot of really, when it comes down to the rules that have been implemented, you look at the targeting rules, now you look at the hip tackle rule and so forth. High school is kind of the last holdout of these things. The NFHS has not come out with a lot of changes there over the years. Now, there are some safety protocols, and certainly, when it comes to concussions, different things like that, there are protocols that, again, are a lot better now than they used to be. In fact, I have a son that's playing high school football right now. Pardon me. And they've got the caps that are, those padded caps that go on top of the helmets now. That's what they're practicing with as well. So there are some safety precautions that have taken place. Obviously, the science that has gone into the making of the helmets and the safety of the helmets are a lot better now. But again, when it gets back to its very base level, football is a rough sport, and there is always that potential of an injury in that. We want to minimize that as much as possible, but we also have to look at the integrity of the game as well. And are we hurting certain types of players more than other types of players with some of these rules? It's just going to be one of these interesting things to look at as we move forward and see how it might affect the sports as we go down. Wow, week 0 coming up this weekend for high school football here in the state of Idaho. There's a lot coming up. You're gonna want to go to IdahoSports.com for the games that are going to be on. Don't forget, you got the Rocky Mountain Rumble coming up now in the new ICCU Dome. That's the new name of it, down in Pocatello, where you got 4 games on the 30th, 4 games on the 31st. Down in the Dome, that pits an Idaho school against a school from out of state. In fact, I got a little list here of these teams. This is the lineup that's going to take place there. Woods Cross, Utah, going to face Mountain View. Legacy, Nevada is going to face Coeur d'Alene. Sutter, California will play Kimberly. Second year in a row that there will be a California school come, and Sugar got the better last year in that matchup. Morgan, if you don't know where Morgan is, by the way, Morgan, they've had some great football teams. They're up the canyon from Ogden High School. They're going to face Skyline. Carson, Nevada, they're going to face Highland. And then you got Soldanta, Alaska is going to take on the Teton Timberwolves out of the Mountain Rivers Conference. And then Wasatch will take on Rigby. That's going to be the closing game there. Also, other events will take place. Tiger Grizzly is going to be covered this year. That's on September 13th. That's, of course, the big cross-country meet held at Freeman Park there in Idaho Falls. And Idaho Sports will have that on play-by-play, followed that night by, of course, the Bishop Kelly at Rigby game. That's a big deal. Bishop Kelly, of course, your perennial 4A power, returning state champions there as well. Rigby, numerous state championships in the last number of years. We're not able to win it last year. However, conference opponent won it. And we got some exciting things coming up, multi-camera games with reporters down on the fields now as well. That's not going to be every game, but we are going to have highlight games each week that will have that. We'll still bring you the great single camera coverage that we brought from many games as well. Another thing I want to do, behind me, you see my board up here. I want to get stickers from every single high school in the state of Idaho. So if you have a sticker of your high school and you see an Idaho sports person, give them a sticker of your high school. I'm going to slap it up here on the board behind me. We'll get it. I want to get stickers from every single high school in the state. Just one. I might not be able to keep them all up and might have to expand where on the board things go, but we want a sticker, just a small one from every single high school in the state. Once again, don't forget, you got to shout out Brandon at IdahoSports.com. This is it for Yappin Sports today. Once again, I'm Lance Taylor. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.